Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And we are back. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week, where we navigate the world of entrepreneurship, business, uncovering stories of perseverance, struggle, innovation, success, and a bit of like wellness as well. But every episode, you know how it is. We adventure into the lives and journey of those who dared to dream and do. And today, we have quite an interesting concept that I would love to unravel. And we have, I feel like, a titan on the industry that we have today. Allow me to introduce Chip Conley is on a midlife mission. After disrupting the hospitality industry twice. First, as the founder of Joie de Vivre Hospitality, the second largest operator of boutique hotels in the US, and then as Airbnb's head of global hospitality and strategy, leading a worldwide revolution in travel. Chip Conley, co founded MEA, Modern Elder Academy, in January 2018 in Baja California, Mexico, inspired by his experience of intergenerational mentoring as a modern elder at Airbnb, where his guidance was instrumental to the company's extraordinary transformation from fast growing startup to the world's most valuable hospitality brand. MEA is the world's first midlife wisdom school. We need to unravel that today. And
Yes.
has a campus opening on a 2,600-acre regenerative horse ranch in Santa Fe, Mexico in early 2014. That is something to look forward to. Dedicated to reframing the concept of aging. MEA supports the students to navigate midlife with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. And today, Chip Conley is a New York Times bestselling author on his seventh book, Learning to Love Midlife 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. It is about rebranding midlife to help people understand the upside of this, a misunderstood life stage. And he was asked to give a 2023 TED Talk on the midlife chrysalis. So, Chip, a lot to unravel there. I am very excited. But first of all, how are you? How is your day? Thank you for coming here and gracing
Yeah.
us with
Thank
your
you.
presence.
Thank you for letting me join you, and I'm like, look forward to your questions.
Fantastic. Chip, I always like to start this at the journey, at the very beginning of everything. Um, of course, yours is a storied, long, extensive journey, right? So,
Are you saying I'm old?
well, no, I was gonna ask that. Is that something that you need to? Because clearly, you deal with midlife, right? And being called old is something that people need to deal with. We'll
Yeah.
unravel that later, Chip.
Sure.
But I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
coming from your journey from founding Joie de Vivre
hmm
Hospitality to becoming, one of the titans of Airbnb, and then co-founding MEA.
hmm
It's quite extensive experience, right?
Yeah.
Could you share with us how it all started? What sparked this initial interest in hospitality industry, and
Yeah.
what shaped this innovation to this approach when it comes to midlife?
So I went to thank you. I went to undergrad and graduate business school MBA at
Hmm.
Stanford and graduated quite young at age 23.
Right.
Went to work for a maverick commercial real estate developer in San Francisco. And I learned a lot and I loved it, but I also wanted to do something more creative. And in San Francisco, there's a big tourism industry and there's a lot of hotels. And so as I got sort of acclimated into the commercial real estate development business in San Francisco, I got curious about boutique hotels, which in the mid 1980s were just getting off the ground in the United States.
Wow.
And one day I found a motel, a no-tell motel, a place where you paid by the hour to stay there. So you can only imagine what was going on in a bad neighborhood in the Tenderloin. And I decided I was going to buy it because it was in bankruptcy. And I was 26 years old and I left my job and
Uh-huh.
started Joie de Vivre. I called it Joie de Vivre because it means in French, joy of
Uh-huh.
life. And
Joy
that
of
was our
life.
mission. And so that's really how I got started. By buying a broken down motel in a bad neighborhood. Didn't have any. I had no experience in hotels. I had some experience in commercial real estate development, and
Okay.
out of the blue, the business succeeded. And over the course of the next 24 years, we created 52 boutique hotels around the state of California.
That's wow. It's almost like there's some symbolism in there, taking a torn down hourly motel and then turning it into a joy of life hospitality. There's like a story
Well, the
in there.
symbolism is perfect with the name of that hotel. It's called the Phoenix, and it's a rock and roll hotel. But the Phoenix is the mythological bird that
Uh-huh.
rises from its own ashes, and that's what it really had to do.
Oh wow. Well, serendipity it is. Wow. So you went from this kind of like a hospitality early on. You started it early on, but now you're focusing on this concept of midlife wisdom. And I really want to break
Hmm.
down this midlife midlife wisdom school, which is the
Hmm.
MEA. It seems like a very new concept, a groundbreaking concept. And what led you from hospitality to that
Hmm.
kind of facilitating an exchange of, you called it an exchange of intergenerational wisdom,
Mm.
especially in the context of a modern elder and Airbnb. So this is like a meaty question, right? First of
Yep.
all, what is a modern elder at Airbnb? What
Yes.
led you to this midlife wisdom school coming from the hospitality industry?
So, first of all, as background, there's a place called the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California, and
Hmm.
it's maybe the most famous personal growth retreat center in the U.S. And I
Hmm.
was on the board there for a decade, as well as taught there for a dozen years. So I had a little bit of curiosity and interest in the personal growth world. When I joined Airbnb, within a few months, they started calling me the modern elder there. I didn't like that at first. It was like, hey, you're making fun of my age. And then they said, no, a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise.
Wow.
And you've brought your wisdom here. And we really appreciate that. But you're also curious. And so I said, okay, I'll be your modern elder. And
Uh-huh.
when I spent 7.5 years with Airbnb, but 4 of those years were full time. When I went from full time to part time, as a strategic advisor, I went down to Baja, where I had a home on the beach, to write a book called Wisdom at Work: The Making of a Modern Elder, talking
Wow.
about my experience with intergenerational collaboration, 5 generations
Hmm.
in the workplace at Airbnb, and what I thought we needed to do as a society to
Uh-huh.
actually foster better relationships in the workplace between the generations. While I was writing that book, I had a Baja aha when I went for a run on the beach, an epiphany. And the epiphany
Okay.
was, why don't we have places for people in midlife, and I'll define midlife in a minute, where people can actually sort of reimagine and repurpose themselves.
Right.
And so that's how MEA came about. And midlife is, a life stage that I write about in my new book, Learning to Love Midlife.
Hmm.
Some sociologists say it lasts from 35 to 75. So that's a long time.
That is a
I
long
like to
time.
think of midlife as not an age specifically, but more of a stage. And it's a stage between early adulthood and later adulthood. Makes
Okay.
sense. Early adulthood, later adulthood, the bridge in between is midlife.
Okay.
And so, how you define your early adulthood and how you define your later adulthood is a huge influence on what would be midlife. And for me, I do believe that as I look at society today, and there are more and more people in their mid 30s feeling nervous about their jobs because they may be obsolescent due to artificial intelligence. And then I also think on the other end of the spectrum, where people are in their mid 70s and still working full time
Hmm.
and think that they're going to live to 100, it's not unheard of to imagine that midlife might last 40 years. Of the 4,000 people who've come to Baja to do our programs from 47 countries, the average age has been 54. but the age range has been from as young as 25 and as old as 88. So there's a wide range of people who've come.
It almost sounds like midlife seems like subjective, like in the
It
sense
is.
that how do you define your early adulthood? Because it seems like we all have different definitions of when we started our adulthood
Hmm.
and when we mature, perhaps. So that was my next question, by the way, and that was almost. It feels kind of like like it almost feels good to feel like okay, midlife is not
Unknown
constrained
caller.
to a certain specific age, right?
Uh-huh.
It's not supposed to be like, oh, that age is coming. I'm about to approach midlife.
Well, let's look. Midlife has a bad brand. Let's start with that. The midlife crisis. There's no life stage that has crisis attached to it other than midlife. Therefore, why do people not like midlife? Well, who wants to have a crisis? They also don't like midlife because midlife is the time where you start like thinking like, oh, I'm no longer youthful. And that's
Right.
true. As we get older, we're not youthful, but hopefully we're useful. Um, Midlife is also like the time when you start knocking on the door of like, oh, my parents are going to die. Friends of mine are going through health diagnoses. So there's a lot of transitions that are happening in midlife. And so for some people, it's like, ooh, I don't want to go into midlife because it's a crisis. It's when you feel like you're no longer young, and it's full of transitions that are painful. So I was like, okay, why would anybody sign up for that?
Yeah.
But there's so much social science research that shows that, generally speaking, based upon the U curve of happiness research in particular, that shows that people's life satisfaction declines from their early 20s till about 45 to 50, at
Oh,
which point it bottoms out. And then you get happier with each decade after age 50. And so that's what I was really interested in is,
wow.
wow, isn't that interesting that you could actually, maybe it's not a crisis, maybe it's a chrysalis. If you think about the caterpillar to butterfly journey, the mid stage of it is the chrysalis. So, the caterpillar spins its chrysalis, goes into the chrysalis. It's dark and gooey and solitary, but it's also where the transformation happens. And on the other side of that, you come out as a butterfly. So, I'm a big believer in the idea of us helping to understand midlife better, understand what gets better with age. And that's why the subtitle of my book is 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, because we're very clear what doesn't get good with age. Just as we get comfortable in our own skin, it starts to sag. Our short-term memory is not as good. There's a lot of things that don't get better with age, but there's many more that actually do get better with age. And I wanted to bring those to light.
That is very clever, by the way. I would just like to say, who doesn't want a crisis, but instead maybe it's a chrysalis. Very
Yeah.
clever, and
Thank you.
and that is why you said when it comes to like this, the differing ages of like or the range of a midlife. Is that why you call it intergenerational wisdom? Because then it's almost like an amalgamation of all this wisdom from all these different stages of life, and just putting them all together. How do you handle that? How do you like put this all together?
Well, my experience at Airbnb was really interesting because I was brought in and they thought, okay, Chip's going to be the wise one who's going to dispense wisdom. But instead, I was actually learning as much as I was teaching. And I called myself a mentor and an intern at the same time,
Okay.
because at age 52, I'd never worked in a tech company before. So I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to learn about millennials because I was surrounded by millennials. And I never worked in my company, my boutique hotel company didn't raise venture capital, but Airbnb was full of venture capitalist funds. And so I had a lot to learn from others. The way I looked at it from an intergenerational perspective is often I was learning DQ from my younger colleagues, digital intelligence,
Hmm.
and they were learning EQ from me, emotional intelligence,
Right.
and emotional intelligence in all of its forms. Sorry for 1 second here. There, emotional intelligence in all of its forms, and emotional intelligence is a very important part of being a good leader. There's no doubt about that. And it's not the only part, but it's a fundamental piece of it. But if you're in your 20s and and you're brilliant and you know tech and you are understanding what you're doing really well,
Hmm.
and you're leading a company with very little training or experience in emotional intelligence, part of my role was to help people microwave their emotional
Uh-huh.
intelligence so
Uh-huh.
they could actually step up in a way that the company needed them to be a mature leader. And that's not something that, generally speaking, people are taught, but
Yes.
that's part of what I did there.
Precisely. And it of course it makes sense that uh, I would say that the generation before us had more emotional intelligence, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
that makes more sense because more interpersonal experiences, and it's just great that having that carry over and having that kind of opportunity to mix all that wisdom in together. One thing I'm very curious about, Chip, and I'm sure that um, the audience would love to also know. Um, I'm quite curious as well when you said like life actually starts getting better when you turn 50. And that's like something I feel like, wow, I can start looking forward to that. You said you were curious about it. Now I'm
Yes.
like, what are the few things? You don't have to tell us like a whole complex answer, but what are the few things that you found that really stood out when it turns to like when it like why is life happier? Why does it start improving when you turn 50?
So there are 12 reasons that I cite in the book, Learning to Love Midlife. And I'll just give you three or four. Number one is our emotional intelligence grows with age. And that's valuable. I mean, that's irrefutable. There's all kinds of data on that. Not only does our emotional intelligence grow, but we become less emotionally reactive. So
Mm,
instead of being the pinball in the pinball machine, we learn how to respond as opposed to
right.
react. That gets better with age.
Mm,
Um, Wisdom, the idea. So I like to call wisdom, our painful life lessons that are the raw material for our future wisdom. So the more life lessons we've had, the more experience that we've had, the more potential for wisdom we have. It doesn't mean we actually are wiser. I know 30-year-olds who are wiser than a 70-year-old. And it's
yes.
partly because the 70-year-old hasn't made sense of their life lessons. They haven't metabolized their experience.
Hmm.
So just because you're older doesn't necessarily mean you're wiser. Having said that, if you are someone older who has made sense of your life lessons, then you probably are wiser. So wisdom is something that can grow with age. Another thing that grows with age is your understanding of yourself and your
Yes.
desire. Your desire to just be yourself and not trying to care about so much about everybody else. Now, it doesn't mean you're not compassionate or empathetic. It's more like you don't care as much what other people say about you. And man, is
Right.
that a relief. That's another one that gets better with age. As we get older, we get better at editing our lives. Learn the first half of our life, we're accumulating. The second half of our life, we're starting to edit. And editing means gives you some space, and so you can have some time back in your life.
Hmm.
And finally, I would just say one more, and there's so many, but I've given you five or six here. Is we get a little bit more spiritually curious as we get older. So there's a spiritual intelligence that starts to grow, and for some it's you can articulate it very well. For others
Hmm.
it's more like this feeling in your gut around wanting meaning in your life, but
Yes.
not exactly sure how you're going to go find that.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I do believe in midlife. It's really important to have what is called a midlife atrium.
Uh-huh.
Have some time and space to reflect upon how do you want to consciously curate the rest of your life. If the average age of the person who comes to MEA is 54 and the average age they think they're going to live till is 90, and that's accurate, 54 is exactly halfway between 18 and 90. So most of us at 54, and I'm 63 now, but at 54, I would not have said, oh, I'm halfway through my adult life. But if you realize that you're halfway through your adult life at 54,
Uh-huh.
you are more likely to say, I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to ask myself
Right.
the question, 10 years from now, what will I regret if I don't learn it or do it now?
Right. Right. It almost like there's it a time is set upon that age where you're like, okay, this is it. If you don't maximize it now, then you're not ever going to maximize it in the latter half of your life, right?
That's
Um,
right.
you mentioned rebranding because midlife really does have a bad rep, right? And
Hmm.
part of what you do, or what part of what you talk about in your book, is like you rebrand the perception of midlife. And
Hmm.
you've rattled off some really good reasons there, among the 12 reasons that you mentioned in your book. But I'd just like to highlight this because one of the most things, or the most common perception when it comes to midlife, why it has such a bad rep, is because of you're losing your physical strength.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
lose your physical vigor, and that is like a sign of like you're dying, you're aging. But all these other aspects in your life are actually quite improving. What is it specifically that you've written in your book when it comes to dealing with this like l- uh this deterioration of your physical vigor, and how do you find a renewed purpose when it comes to feeling that, and how do you approach midlife differently?
Well, if you show up in life with a curiosity and a passionate engagement for what you're
uh,
doing
uh-huh.
and your mission and your purpose,
Mhm.
people won't notice your wrinkles. They'll notice your energy. And that's what people have said to me for a long time. I am very vigorous. I have a lot of vitality, partly because I love what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Now, does my body look as good today as it did 30 years ago? It doesn't. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't. So, one of the things I've gotten used to as I've gotten older is that my body doesn't define me anymore. When I was younger, maybe my body defined me. And so I cared a lot about what it looked like. It's not that I don't care anymore, and I'm in, relatively good shape. I think of my body as a rental vehicle that was issued to me at birth.
Mhm.
Here you go, Chip. This is your rental vehicle. Take good care of it. But
Uh-huh.
the longer you've been on this planet, the more miles you have on on that vehicle. And so it may not look as good on the exterior, but it hopefully feels better on the interior.
Mhm.
And so what I believe is that we've got to get used to the idea that our body needs to be well maintained, needs to have
Mhm.
tune-ups, needs to be cared for because you want it to live a long time. But you want to focus more on the long-term maintenance than the short-term vanity. And when
Right.
I was younger, I would focus more on the short-term vanity because I cared a lot what I looked like. I cared, that I was in good shape. I
Right.
wanted to look good if I was
Right.
walking around in a bathing suit by the pool. It's not that I don't care about that anymore, but it's not as high of a priority. One of the things I say in the book is a six pack is expensive as you get older. And what I mean by that is six pack abs. You can have them at 70, but you're going to work four times as many hours a day keeping those six pack abs at
Mhm.
70 than you are at 30.
Mhm.
And the question you need to ask yourself is what's the opportunity cost for your six pack?
Right.
And a lot of people don't think that way. Similarly, I see a lot of people my age who've done Botox or plastic surgery, or they've done all kinds of things to try to keep looking young.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to say that's a bad thing or a good thing. What I do want to say is if you get obsessed about it,
Yes.
you're not realizing that as you get older, you should no longer be playing on the physical playing field.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
you're looking competitively versus everybody else, you
Mhm.
should start to get used to like, hey, there's not just a physical playing field, there's the emotional playing field, the spiritual
Mhm.
playing field, the relational playing field. As we get older, we may be better
Right.
emotionally, relationally,
Uh-huh.
spiritually, even potentially intellectually. I mean, up until about our early 70s, our crystallized intelligence, is our ability to think systemically and holistically, gets better.
Right.
Yes, our short term memory starts to fade in our 30s and gets worse with each year after that. But it's not like at 63 today, I'm forgetting like what am I doing right after this? My short term memory, it's not as good as it was. I have to make notes to myself a little bit more.
Mhm.
But we all lose our keys at various ages of our lives. It doesn't just happen when you get older.
Precisely. I love how you said like it's tune up, right? But
Yep.
especially once you get to that kind of point in your life that okay, you used to do small term gains, but now you need to start thinking of the long term. How do you do these tune ups in your life where
Mhm.
you no longer cannot put as much time in your
Mhm.
physicality at what it looks like, and really it's just like your values change as you age. And we I love how you highlighted the Botox culture, right? Because it's
I
so
mean, there are people
sad.
in Gen Z. There are people in Gen Z. New York Times just had an article about Gen Zers who are actually doing Botox. And it's like, really? Wow.
They don't probably don't even need that yet.
No, they don't. You
So
don't. You got perfect skin.
thank you, thank you, Chip. I do value my current health. You know, I I punish my body a lot, but now I'm valuing. I don't have vices. I don't drink. I don't smoke, and I feel
Mm.
like these are things that you need to start valuing more as you get up in that age. And these are the tune-ups that I was talking about, because when it comes to like retuning your values, what you value, the Botox culture starts getting more sad, because you're trying to
Mm.
hold back this kind of value that is inevitable, that is
Inevitable. Yep.
it's gonna go, it's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
leave you. So I love that you there's a voice to this, that you are the
Yeah.
voice to kind of like rebranding this perception when it comes to midlife. um Chip, when it comes to your influence, um in incorporating, wisdom sharing,
Hmm.
um when it comes to your experience as a figure in the hospitality industry. This is more of a closing question, but when it comes to these both aspects, especially now that you are the leading voice, I would say, on Midlife
Mm.
Chrysalis, what are your
Mm.
future aspirations? What are you looking at? What are you seeing when it comes to these both sides that you've become a big figure in? And what are the
Yeah.
future plans for Chip?
Yeah, well, I think MEA. I mean, first of all, I love writing, and so I'm going to keep writing books. And this book, Learning to Love Midlife, in its second day on out in the public, became the number one happiness and self help book on Amazon. So yeah, I mean, it's doing well, and I'll keep writing. And I have a daily blog called Wisdom Well that's on both my personal chipconley.com website and the MEA website, which is meawisdom.com.
Uh-huh.
MEA is going to be continuing to grow. We've got the Santa Fe Ranch, as you mentioned earlier, the huge ranch on 4 square miles that opens in April. We have another location. We have obviously our Baja location where we started 6 years ago on the beach in
Uh-huh.
Mexico. We have a
Mhm.
second location in Santa Fe, which is a 12.5 acre former Catholic retreat center and seminary
Wow.
that's historic property next to St. John's College on Museum Hill. It's gorgeous. That will open in 2 years. We have regenerative residential communities,
Mhm.
intergenerational communities based on wisdom.
Mhm.
One in Baja that's opening now, and we have multiple ones that we're going to be doing in Santa Fe.
Mhm.
So, in sum, I really want to help society understand that midlife is a transformational time,
Mhm.
and it is an opportunity to actually allow yourself to evolve from who you were to the next thing of who you're going to be. And in order to do that, I do think we need schools and tools and rites of passage and rituals. We have those when we're in adolescence, but we
Right.
don't have them when we're in middlescence. And middlescence is a word that describes midlife.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. I love that. We don't have a school. We have a school for adolescents. We don't have a school for middlescents. So a lot
Mm.
of stuff to look forward to. Chip, your new a 2,600-acre facility for
Yeah.
MEA, and you've really put a cross between hospitality and what you're doing when it comes to this uh, personal development and growth, and this perception in midlife. Um, you've rattled on. You've told us about your website. You've told us about your book. Tell us again where we can find you. Tell us again where else can we connect with you, and
Yeah.
anything that you would like the audience to know.
So, book you'll find anywhere where books are sold. Learning to Love Midlife. The book I wrote before that was called Wisdom at Work. That's my based upon my Airbnb experience. If
Right.
people want to understand
Wow.
intergenerational collaboration, that's a good book. The chipconley.com website has all kinds of information on it. The
Mhm.
MEA website has meawisdom.com is all kinds of information about our workshops, our online courses,
Mhm.
etc. And both websites have my blog, and my blog also appears on LinkedIn. So on my LinkedIn profile, so you can go to LinkedIn and read my various writings there as
Yes.
well.
I will definitely connect with you on that, and I will read that
All right.
blog every day. Thank you so much, Chip.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your wisdom. I feel like it's a perception that not only I would value and carry with me, I feel like it's something the audience would also would resonate with them as well. Thank you for your time, Chip,
Great.
and
Thank
I'll
you.
catch you on the next one.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you.
So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.